Welcome to another episode of Inside the Barrel, where Jon and I talk about consulting life, behind the scenes, getting into ServiceNow from a technical standpoint. And today we have a juicy topic around scripting.
Juicy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not as juicy as your background, Jon, but still
Oh,
juicy
stop. Don't
nonetheless.
don't look. We're doing some
Um,
remodeling, and so stuff's all over, well, over there. Stuff's in the way, and
yeah, yeah. So today is one that I feel like I've been converted to a believer in there's only one right way to do something in ServiceNow, and and normally it's like there's like four or five different ways, but like I think this is the only way to do something.
I don't know that I'm converted. I still like options. I like
Yeah,
freedom to
yeah.
do how I think it might work the best for me.
So
But
so, so let's see if I can convince you by the end of
all
this.
right, yeah, sure. Why not?
So really the first part about this is it is the problem that we have is ServiceNow has a lot of different fields that have the word script, whether it's a business rule, a
Yeah,
transform map, before and after transforms, like UI policies, client scripts. Like there's so many different places you could add a script.
yeah,
And and so most of the time, someone's like, "Oh, I need to build a client script or I need to build a business rule. It's simple. I'm just going to write the script in there and, off they go." Um,
yeah. I think
the
when I first started with ServiceNow, my biggest hang up was knowing where I was with scripts. Like, was I on the client side or was I in the server side? And so it was always like, wow, I don't know where I don't know where the script lives.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's like one of the downfalls is like if you ever had to like troubleshoot something, like you're and you had to like it was a client script or a UI policy and maybe a business rule and maybe a flow, like there's so many different places that you would have to
Yeah,
potentially debug to even find the thing that is then being called. And like that logic may be different than how someone else is doing it in another part of the system.
yes.
Um, and so the rule of thumb that I like to use is every script, and I'll use the word like all of them, every, no exceptions. Every time you have to write code, it should be in a script include. And and so anytime you have to write JavaScript code. So the exception of HTML and a little bit of service portal is aside, but I think even the server side script part of service portal should be in a script include. So you shouldn't have long blocks of text there. So um,
Well, I think we agree to disagree on that one.
I knew
And
I
and
knew.
don't get me wrong, I love server or script includes, but
Yeah.
there is
So
a time and place for everything.
I will tell you the biggest benefit of why I truly believe that is the only way you can truly test your code from a unit test, from a developer best practice, is if it's in a script include. And that's hands down. Like if you write some script or some logic in a widget in a server side script, you actually can't test that programmatically. You would only be able to test that essentially manually, without recreating or copying pasting the code.
But doesn't that create so uh, lately I've been spending a lot of time with catalog items, and
Mhm.
I am not a fan of Glide Ajax when it comes to
Mm,
catalog items, just because you have an on change that doesn't wait, right? So
mm,
you then have to move it over to a submit, which kind of you lose some of the flexibility and real time uh, information conveyance to the user, right? So if
mhm.
I have an on change on a field, dates, and I've got to go run a Glide Ajax to use the date utils, right?
Mhm.
I don't get my response in time for them to submit, right? And so I, I'm not sure that I totally agree on that I should have done it through a script include because I don't like
Well,
the.
Well, your Glide Ajax, right, could call a script include, right? Like all
Right,
Glide
no,
Ajaxes
yeah,
are.
exactly. That's why you would do it. But if you can't, if it's what is it, asynchronous? Is that the right
Uh-huh.
term? If it's going to continue without waiting for my response, I potentially could have a submit on my
Yeah.
hands
So
that,
I'll give you the secret, and we should do another podcast on just that.
oh, well, if there's a
The
secret, I'd love
Yeah,
to
yeah.
know.
The solution is you essentially add a true or false field on every catalog to determine if that catalog is ready to be submitted. So all of your AJAX things can totally, be firing off and filling out and doing validation. But until all of the fields that you are truly requiring that have an AJAX are filled in, then there you would turn like that true or false field to true, and then your on submit requires that to be, and you don't show that to the user.
I would agree with that. I've actually done a few things kind of like that where I've kind of preloaded the form with Glide Ajax before it's available. So what I
Mm-hmm.
mean is like I had what did I need? I needed to find something out. I had a sys property that had a value. It had a date,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I needed to validate against that date. So I would Glide Ajax call on load and then fill that hidden field in with that date.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree that that is usable that way, but um, I really wish it was more straightforward. Like I wish there was a way to get or a better way to deal with server calls from the client side as far as catalog items went. But I will quasi allow
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's like a pattern you could truly follow, like maybe adding a field on like on a catalog item and then having a variable set. Like there's probably ways you could speed it up so that like you have a routine pattern for all of your catalog items. That's why I say we could do an entire other video
Oh,
on just
sure.
solving
Yeah.
that problem because I think that's a
Yeah.
really valid one. I think.
I do too. I think a lot of people run into this issue,
Mhm.
um, and that may be why they have a bad taste on server side.
Yeah.
Because I don't
Yep.
because Glide Ajax is tricky. It's not super straightforward, and you really have to understand what's going to happen when you use it.
Yeah, so we'll table that one and we'll do another podcast on that one specifically. So
Cool.
let's kind of dive in and see if I can convince you the different types of script includes you can have. So there isn't just one, and two, how you can test all of your scripts. So we'll see if I can convince you that this is the right way to test it. And then three, maybe show off some ATF and some of the new features with that, with doing that test to really show like the power of unit testing.
Sure.
And yeah, so we'll again unscripted, so I don't have all the answers. We may have to write
But
some code on screen.
but do you have a magic oven, code oven?
Um, I do sometimes. So we'll see if my
All
magic
right.
code oven works this time.
Okay.
So
Sweet. Let's do it.
we'll see if that works. So let's get my
At
screen
some point
up.
a long time ago, I wrote a blog article about different uses for the script include, and it was there were only three that I came across at that time. This was like 3 or 4 years ago, but it was you could write you have a script include, but you could write it to be used via like through a REST call where you
Hmm.
pass this dot what is it parameter, you know you could multi-use the script include to where you could call it from a portal widget or through a REST API call, right? Um,
Hmm.
and I think I put my thoughts in there on why, because back then I also thought a lot of things should be backed up by a script include, like widgets and so forth. And then I realized that there's different use cases there where if you have a widget that's really portable, I don't necessarily want it backed up with a script include because then you have additional components that have to go with it, right?
Sure.
Now, in consulting though, like I did a really big portal for a really big company, And I backed a lot of stuff up to a scripting include because I was using it in multiple places, and I didn't want to,
Mm-hmm.
if I have to write code twice, no, no,
Mm-hmm.
I'll
Yeah.
put it into a script include because I don't want to rewrite stuff, or if I have to change it, I don't want to go to multiple places to change it. So there,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, there are cases where, yeah, I'll have a heavy lifter behind all my widgets, but that's a unified portal, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
disparate different clients and stuff like that. And so there are some things to think about when you do that, though.
Yeah, totally. So let's I think I like us over here. Let's kind of jump in and see what we can get into. So
Ooh, is that SNU Tills redoing
SNU
the
tills
run script?
still
shout
beautiful.
shout
Uh,
out to Arnud.
yeah, yeah. And I do want to give out a shout out to Travis. So I stumbled upon it from an article from 2017 about interface design patterns for script includes. I'll kind of just show it on the screen real quick to kind of show people what this article is really good. We'll include it in the links as well to help people get started. And so a lot of the reference material will come from there, and we'll kind of jump back between that and the instance for it.
I
Uh,
wonder if this video will cause him to revisit that with new thoughts.
Interesting. Yeah, that would be cool. Maybe
I
someone
mean,
sent it to him.
yeah, that's what 5 years ago. Lots of things have changed in ServiceNow in 5 years.
Yeah. Wow. I can't believe it's 5 years ago. Wow. So, um, so let's kind of start with like the basic pattern for script include. And what
Yep.
I think we're going to do is we're going to write script includes that modify user records. And the reason why we're going to do that is because it's very common to have like business rules potentially lock people out or transform maps for um, like user provisioning, have to manipulate users. So I think it's yes, it's still a little demo-y, but it's still potentially valid. And
Sure.
it's a really easy one to potentially test.
Well, I mean, it's the same idea. A business rule allows you to modify a record,
Hmm. Hmm.
on change or before or after, and it's due to something, right? So I want to make this
Yep.
change because of another change.
Yep. So what we're gonna do is we have our favorite Abel. If you haven't seen his LinkedIn profile, it's awesome. Um, so shout out to the SN Dev community for doing that. And the thing that we'll probably try to modify in our script is whether this is active, true, or false. Um, and so what we'll start doing is you'll want to make sure you're in the right scope. So, but we're just going to be in global for this. You'd want to make sure you're in an update set, but we've done videos on that, so we're going to skip that. And now it comes to naming conventions is our first
Uh,
step in this architecture. And if we're going to follow something that ServiceNow does, they either do something like uh, uh, a
cat.
DAO object.
Well, yeah. So that's where I picked up my habit of doing DAOs, but just be aware. I don't know that ServiceNow even follows something
Oh, yeah, different
because
teams do different things.
yeah, exactly. Different teams do different things.
So either it'll be something like you'll see something like a
Yeah,
utils or maybe like a DAO.
yeah.
Um,
I
and
like utils. I think utils is
I
a
think utils
better
is
wording.
good. And notice that it'll pre-populate some of this stuff for you. We're going to select all application scopes in this case, in case you want to call it. And whether or not you want to make it an Ajax or not is simply this.
Yeah,
Uh,
and just as a side note here, if you are going to put something in the store and you mark client callable and this script include never gets called from the client, they will get on your case about that and
mm,
they'll fail it.
hmm.
Um,
I like it. I like it.
yeah, so if you're building something for the store, make sure you're clicking on things that you should be clicking on
Yeah.
because ServiceNow doesn't like it if you don't.
Yeah, and so we kind of talked about naming conventions. Like normally the naming convention is what is the thing you're going to modify in ServiceNow and then add utils potentially next
Yeah.
to it. So if I'm modifying user groups, right, I would probably do user group or maybe user role or maybe just roles in general or groups in general. So I really try to keep it related to the thing that you're actually taking action on, whether there's intermediate steps or not. So,
How do you feel about let's go to the portal side for a second here and say,
mhm.
we're doing a large scale portal um, project, and you have a master script include. Do you think it's appropriate to have children below that are referenced in a master? Like, so, you have the master one, and then you have like, maybe pages or something like that where it has other things below it.
Yeah, so my rule of thumb is break out your script includes one that are logical. So let's say you've already done that. And then two, break it out so that multiple developers can potentially work on it at the same time.
Yes. Yeah.
So you don't want one giant one because then you're in like a merge conflict kind of scenario.
Oh, I overwrote your code.
Yeah,
Sorry.
or like to get it actually merged, you're like looking at some diffs all the time. So
Yeah.
you really want to find the right balance between multiple people being able to work on it and not too many script includes that don't have meaning. So in your case, yes, it's
Yeah.
totally fine to have either really big ones that have separate functions, and we'll kind of talk about that pattern, or maybe even having certain, just don't name it like user utils one, user utils two, user utils three, because
What?
it won't
So I
make much
can't.
sense.
Who does that with GRs?
Yeah,
GR1, GR2.
Joe. Ooh,
No, I
like
totally agree though, and that's the big proponent in my head is why I would have parent child is multi
mhm,
developer, right?
mhm,
If it's
mhm,
just me on the project, I'm usually with just one giant script include because
mhm.
who's going to be in there? Just me. But if I've
Yep.
got multiple guys on the team working on the same project, yeah, splitting it out makes it easier to handle um, the other developers and lets them do their own thing and nobody steps on each other.
We got somebody asking a question. Can you post
Oh,
the link? Yeah, this is the link that we're referencing, Devin. So I'll also put that in the description after. So thanks for asking. So let's go back to where we're at. All right, so let's start with the basic pattern, which is where Travis starts us off. Is there's essentially a script include pattern, and it looks something like this, just to let you know what his thing is doing. You essentially have an initialize function, which is kind of similar to what do you want to set on start. So once this is initialized, you essentially it's like your kind of like your global variables in here. And oh, I'm not sharing. Uh, you could just tell me.
yeah.
Uh, there we go. We're there.
Isn't there a Zoom song about you're not sharing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So essentially to back us up, I'm just kind of talking through the like initialize function. Um, Essentially it's like setting your scoped global variables. Oof, that's a tough one. So once you call this user utils, it will initialize any of those things and we'll play around with it. And what we can do first is talk about um, these two concepts, the idea of having a private function, and also, where else are we going to name this class pattern, since we'll start with this, um, a private function and a public function. And Travis kind of talks about that as well in his uh, uh, in his document as well. So we'll start off pretty easy, right? Let's do some things here. So we'll just do like a GS print, you know, my function, and we'll start with just understanding or how to like call these so that they make sense. And this will be, my private function, and then we'll just show this as well, initialize. You think this will work?
Sure, why not?
Why not? All right, so now how do we call that? So we're gonna go to our background script, and then we'll switch over to ATF shortly, but just to kind of get us going. And then you essentially call apparently
So as another side note, I really wish ServiceNow would buy Explore and replace background scripts with that. I got to tell you, it's much more handy and user friendly.
I 100% agree with you. So, what do we think is going to happen if I just do this? What do you think, Jon?
I think you're only going to get the initialize function or the initialize print.
Okay, and I'm probably going to get a global object, right? Or just an object, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because I think this creates an object. Hey, look at that. So we know initialize works, and we instantiated this object. So now let's see if we can, call our function, right? So c dot my function, and we called it, and then we also got some undefined that's happening. Yeah. And I don't know where that undefined is coming from. So that's fun. Maybe someone else smarter than me can tell us. And then we're also going to go and try to call our private function. So in theory, we shouldn't be able to.
Yeah, it'll work. It's not necessarily like really private. It's more like these are the internal functions I need for my script include, but they're accessible by anyone. They're accessible by anything.
So it's not really private.
Right.
At least in this case, right? We'll get a little bit further and see how that works. But
yeah.
So that's kind of your basic, pattern and function, right? And so
this is what you're used to this is how you build them most of the time. Like for me, in 5 years, I don't think I've ever changed how I built script includes. I have started getting into that initialize area where I've done my constants and stuff like that. So they're available, but I really haven't changed much, old dog, new trick thing.
Yep.
If it works, right?
Totally. So let's see if we could do something a little bit more advanced. I don't think sum is an actual function though. So, or maybe
you have to write sum.
Yeah, let's do return 1 + 2 and return count +1. So let's see what happens here, right? So when I call that, I only get the 3, right? So I have no idea what count is, but let's see if you think we can access count anyway?
If you just do C, yeah.
And then what? How do I actually get that variable, if possible? Can I do like c.count? Think that would work?
No, because it'll say that's.
So there's no real way to get this other than using it to initialize, at least in this current context.
Yes, correct.
Yep. Okay.
You're really just setting a constant up there is what's happening.
In order to essentially be called, right? So.
And see, I always thought you'd have to access count. So in the second function, you'd actually have to do this dot count.
This dot count. We'll see. Count is not defined, so you are correct.
So if you do this dot count, you should pick up. Yeah.
Yep. which makes sense, right? Because if this is a JavaScript object, it's initialized as an object, and then you have to call those the object itself, which is this in this case.
Yeah.
So, but now we got NaN, so it doesn't like this dot count plus one.
Interesting. I wonder why.
Um,
Or why it considers count to be a nan and not a number.
yeah, maybe we could do something like number, but I don't think this is going to work either. But you can wrap things like number around things if it's supposed to. But yeah, so there's probably some scoping issue here now, right?
What if you, well, I'm trying to think because I thought it's either inside the initialize or outside that you can do that.
I think it's like actually something like this dot count
Oh,
equals
yeah, that's
one.
right. Yeah.
I think that is the right way to reference it.
I think if you move it outside of the
Yeah, there you go.
initialize, like if you did above my function and did like, yeah, var. And so this is another thing where it comes into what you think's right. Like I always do capitals if I'm going to do constants. So I do the entire, but that's, I don't know if that's it's not a requirement.
But how would you add it here, right?
You have to, you don't use oh, I thought it was, maybe it's above that, but it's not a semicolon.
I mean, maybe I have to put
it above the initialize.
And above the initialize, yeah. That's probably a bad practice.
And do a comma, yeah.
Do a comma? I don't know if that would work, right? So let's just say you shouldn't do that.
Okay.
I think you could do it outside of this, right? I think we could do something like var count 2 equals 4, and then I think you can like call this, but I don't remember how. I think we could just reference it here as count 2.
Count 2.
But
no, I don't know.
I don't think that's going to work either.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'd have to look at how. Let me see if I can find an old.
Oh, it worked. It worked. So you can.
It must just be the type of head stuff.
Well, this is scary to do, right? Because this is, I think, a global. This makes it like global, and it's not scoped to this function.
Yeah, very scary.
So I would be careful with manipulation there.
Yes, I would agree with that one.
So, but we're moving along. This dot count. So and then we'll do this dot count, and we're in a good state. So now I'll just quickly show, now that we have a function that's working, what would you do in an ATF? Like, remember I said the biggest benefit of putting every script into a script include is so that you can unit test it. So let's see if I can, prove that. And we're going to name this like script include, or scripts. Script includes unit tests. You could put them all in here, but you probably don't. We probably want user utils, unit tests, and we could probably parameterize this too if we really wanted. Yeah, let's go super advanced, because there's a new feature here that we can take advantage of. So Jon, you're typing away so loud.
I'm about to send you a message on how it works. You don't do var.
Yeah, you do this. We showed that, right?
No.
Gotcha.
Adding the constants, if you will, you initiate them above the initialize without the var, and then they're accessible with this dot variable.
Gotcha. So what? Jon sent me was something like, and I don't think it matters where you do it. It'll be like fun, or let's say count :1. And then let's just comment this out and see if this still works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So 1 + 1 is 2. So
Yeah.
this looks like another way. And again, I don't know what the scope is or the safety of this. So something to keep in mind. That's another question for
Well, you
somebody
could always
smarter.
see if you could call count outside of your new in your background script.
Oh yeah, because it would be potentially a property of this,
Yeah,
right?
if it's global, then it would be available, but
So c.count should return, yeah. So
yeah.
that way, this is a way you could, if you didn't want to initialize, but
Well,
I
if you
think
want you
even
wanted to
I
have
think
it available with just your call to the script include, so you can you don't have to run the function, you can just
oh
run the property, I guess is what it turns into, right? C dot
yeah,
property.
and let's see if we can call. We should be able to call counter as well. So you could call it. It looks like it's just another route you could do. Again, like this is scoped inside of a self-executing function, right? But this, like, they're both accessible because it's an object, right? Like I can call c.counter in this case as well.
Yeah.
So I would probably put them in the initialize. There is probably a use case of this may actually be more memory efficient because it probably isn't called where this is called right away. Like I don't actually know. That's a deeper question out of my skill set right now.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So now let's say we have our test, and we essentially want to do something probably a little bit more useful, like setting a user to active or not, right? So set active, let's say that's the name of this function, and it probably needs to take in a user record. So now we're getting somewhere, and we're gonna do something like user record dot, let's check if user record exists. Then set user record dot, I guess this would, we could be like super
Well,
fancy here and do like a
if you're
try.
doing, yeah, but if you're if you're passing over the glide record object, which is a weird beast, then
Mhm.
yeah, you could probably just do user record dot active equals true, and then user dot record. Do you do a set value?
I think set value is the safer route than calling a dot.
Sure. And then you can do a user record update, right?
Yep.
Or, well, I guess it depends. Oh, what business rule are you using this on?
Yeah, no, you're right. Well, I think
Because you
it's,
can check, can't you? You can do that. There's an action or something that tells you.
if it's like a new record or not. We'll keep it simple in this case, but like imagine there's like a set record or a set active, and like maybe there's like um, let's do something like this dot active user. So if we only want to set them active if they're an inactive user, and we're going to make that our private function. Is that,
Throw your underscore up there too.
yeah, user. So, else return 3. Don't tell me, don't tell me what to
Return
do. Obviously, you should return something more useful. But so
Yeah,
now what
set
we're
them
going
to
to do,
set them to false.
yeah.
Deactivate them.
So we'll do var activity equals, and this also has to take a user record. Just use a different one. Equals userrec.get value of active if activity exists. So if it's true, return false, else return true. With me on that?
I am. There is some issue here, and I only bring this up because I ran into it at some point
Mm-hmm.
where someone else wrote the script includes and did it this way, but
Mm-hmm.
from the portal, from the server side on the portal, I didn't have, when I see the user, I just passed over the sysid, and so we just had to change, or we just had to update them
Mm-hmm.
to say,
To make
oh,
a call.
if user record is not the object, then go
Mm-hmm.
get the
Mm-hmm.
object. Because I wasn't sure I could pass the glide record object from server side on the widget to a script include very well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we just had to add another layer of check, a try catch, if you will.
Yeah, so let's see if how should we test this in a background script first?
Sure.
Um, and then we'll go into making this an ATF. And so, all right, so to call that private function, we need to
You need a user
var
object, yeah.
user glide record equals new glide record. We should be user glide query, but that's fine. Sys user and user gr. We're gonna cheat.
Glide query is not always the answer, Dorian.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Um, and we're gonna use a get on email. I think that's, or maybe it's the other way. It's been a while since I've used gets. I never remember what goes first.
Well, it's if you knew this, the sysid, you just plug that in there. But if you're doing two pieces
Yeah,
to it,
that's okay. We'll just
yeah,
sysid
okay,
it for now.
yeah.
And now that, again, you should do some error handling here, but in our case, we're
We know it
passing in
exists.
user gr. And let's just see if this returns a true or a false, right? So,
New private doesn't exist.
oh, you're right. There's my quick fingers here. And we're using real things now.
Yeah,
All right. So are they an inactive user? The answer was no. But now if we go here and make them an inactive user,
should get true.
ooh, did I go too fast? Yeah, we should get true, but we don't. So something's wrong with our code. And I wonder if it's because get value
Yeah,
returns
I
maybe
don't
a
think that
string.
works. I think you need to. I almost say I think you have to do like the user.rec.active, but
Let's see what we're getting here.
you may have to do type of also to see what it is.
0 to 0. Ooh, interesting. Or a 1. Wow. So the active field isn't a true or false for some reason, or maybe this get
Well,
value
it's
returns
a
0 or 1.
boolean. It's a boolean, so 0 would be false, 1 should be true.
But I think that's not true in truthy. So
I thought I put a thing at some point in my. I think I have a script snippet for that. How you can do an easy
we'll just check it.
conversion on that. Let me see if I can find it.
We're going at light speed here. All right. So we got them to be inactive. Oop, I did it the wrong way. Not equal to 0. Okay, so if they're active, It should return false, which they are, and now if they're inactive,
Yeah,
it should return true.
I had one of those shorthand JavaScript snippets that would do the zero because, and then sometimes you get them as strings, which is
Yeah.
really annoying. Oh my
Yep.
gosh.
So now that we know that they're inactive, right? Let's see if we can call our set active, right? So we can uncomment out. Well, we don't need to. This doesn't return anything. I guess it doesn't return anything, but we can make it return something if we want. We'll make it return the user record.
Yeah, you also need to change your function call on the
Yeah,
background script.
I know. Wasn't gonna mess up twice. So set active, and we're gonna pass in the user gr. Cool. So this should return an object in our case, right? Because
It should
we should be.
return that sys ID.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah,
And
there you
you can
go.
see that we updated, right? That user.
Yeah.
Now, if we run it again, it shouldn't update that user and it returns 3. So cool. We got our script working. Beautiful. So, so now let's add an ATF for this, and we could show again. My main point is so that we can update. So, let's say user. This will be user sys ID max lane 32. Okay, I think is sys ID one of them? QID? No. Okay, string it is. Couldn't remember. Save. And there's probably a standard here. You may not want to call this column u_user sys ID. You may want to call it after the actual ATF itself. But that's another discussion for standards of that. So we got a sys ID, and we want a test step first, right? So the first test step is we're gonna actually create a user. Ooh, will this work?
Will it automatically go active?
Actually, I'm gonna delete this because I want to reference first. And I want to reference the user table. Maybe this will let me just change it since I haven't done anything with this. That'll be really great. Save. Wow, just allowing us to change database things, no problem. Look at that.
Well, you had no records on it, so
Yeah, no, I know, but I was worried for a second. I was like,
create
all
organs.
right.
Yes, go ahead.
So in this case, we're going to use table, right? So that's essentially, a test parameter, right? So now we're gonna be passing in the GR record, and we're gonna do a test step. And the test step we're gonna do is run a server-side script. And we don't really need most of this, but I wonder if they updated this to be to support something new that they did. So there's a lot of stuff in here that are really cool. Specifically, you can the new thing here is params, so you can now access parameter data. So that's the big new San Diego feature here. Is before you couldn't access parameterized data in your run server script include, so it's really a pain in the butt. You'd have to use some sort of step previously in order to get it. But do they give you an example of how to actually access that parameter? They don't. Beautiful. Okay, so we're gonna cheat, and we're just gonna gs.print.
Well, wouldn't
params.
it be? Yeah, I was gonna say, wouldn't it be the? You might have to JSON stringify that in case that comes out as an object.
Shall we do both? Params, is it
No,
this? It's 2 null.
no, you do JSON dot stringify.
Oh yeah.
And
What
then
am I?
params.
Yeah, but I wanted it to be pretty, and I think it's like it's like that.
Sure.
Can't remember if the 2's first or the
Pretty.
1, 2's. I don't know.
Why don't they just do prettify?
Yeah. Run test. See what we get. Of course, our test passed because we weren't actually testing anything. But we want to see. Okay, so you access it by its name.
Yeah,
Which it said was, which you said it was empty. But I don't know if that's always going to be the case. All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see. So now let's try to access params. So params. Let's see if we could params dot this. You think that? Because if it's empty, that's not ideal, right? Because we would need to pass that in. Or I guess what we can do is we'll just call our function. So where's ours?
Well, so before you do that though, can you just pass it right there in the script and say, here's my sysid? Or is that not, like, you can't, I guess my question is how do you do dynamic here in the testing that you want to just choose any different person that you want?
Yeah, you would put it in the parameters, right? So like if this user is, so it's something like this. So ideally, this is passing the GR record, right? Which should tell us returning true or false, right? And
but where do you set your param?
I'll show you where we set it.
Oh, okay.
Res dot just print res. So we're just seeing if we can get closer to what we were doing before, right? So here we essentially on your test run data sets is where we add people, right? So this is where we added Abel. We'll add Abraham here as well. And now this should be callable from this script. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So we're gonna run this, and again, it's only passing because we're not actually asserting anything. But we got false on this, so we're getting pretty good. And what about Abe? Is Abe gonna be false? Abe is also false. So this person is active. So let's just run that one more time, but make them inactive so that we have some different test data. And what's actually cool is, I guess we should show the next feature is this debug test. So what that does is you can add a breakpoint at any point in your test. So we're gonna add a breakpoint here, and then we're gonna debug test. And we're not gonna pause before rollback in this case, but I'll show what that is later. But we're now in the breakpoint. So in theory, we could, go and inspect something if we needed to. We're not really doing anything, so we're just going to step over it in this case. But it's like in theory, you can step over the breakpoints and inspect stuff. So that'll come in handy later. So Abe in this case should be true, right? Oh, but it wasn't. So something is still not right with our function, right? Because we set Abe to active, or is inactive, so that should have returned true, and then Abraham is active. So those should have returned different results, and they're not, right? So something's fishy. But what we should do is essentially like start doing the part that is actually gonna to validate our tests. So if we go in here, so normally what you do is something like a before all. So I'm gonna copy some pseudocode, right? So this is from who wrote this? Oh, I'm gonna butcher your name. Kaliarasan, on the Unlearn series on the community forum. Um, Pretty much wrote a little bit of how you can do unit tests within ATFs. So here's an example where what they do is they set something up. So before all, right? So before everything, um, they're saying, do some stuff, which is essentially initializing our pattern, right?
Sure.
So now that we've initialized our pattern, we can then say that, does, or so let's use some user utils class pattern, expect that our script, when it's calling this function, is to equal, and then we expect it to be, false, right? Like that's like essentially how you would do it. Now it gets tricky here because we're like this test should only test one thing, right? So like in this case, if we're passing this user, it should equal false, but it should fail for somebody, right? Because they're not because they're different results, right? So for one of them it should fail, the other one it should pass. But this is essentially the premise of this, and so we'll show you what this looks like. So if you are planning on using Jasmine, so that's where this expect comes in, you want to uncomment out this line, and so
Okay.
we can click save, and we'll run this test again, and we're going to remove this breakpoint for now. Um, Run test. And they both return false, which we know isn't true, right? So Abe, for example, is not inactive, right? And it's saying that the test passed, right? And it shouldn't. So that means something is not working as it should. Um,
I wonder if you're getting back a string.
so you think because it's not a background script now, it's operating differently,
I don't know. Those checkboxes, the true false guys, I always
or
like
like super painful?
dub yeah, I double my chances and say, hey, does it equal zero or does it
Yeah,
equal string zero?
yeah.
But I don't know. It could totally be something else that's causing it, but uh, man, and I've heard from other people where they could never get a condition
Right.
on a
Okay,
Boolean.
so let's say, so if they're inactive, right? So if they're inactive, we're saying, um,
So I would also do one that has the zero in the quote.
what was the, what was our inactive? So is Abe considered inactive? Yes, yes, okay. So not equals to zero. So, so if it equals zero, it's false, right? Or sorry, it's not equal to zero. So zero is true and other one is false. Equals
I thought
false.
zero was false, one was true.
Do we have to GS print this again?
I'd also do a type of just, I mean, I guess from a background it comes back as a Boolean, but
I mean, we're
yeah.
here, right? So we'll
But I
just
feel like your
see.
center one is incorrect.
Oh, the false.
Yeah, that should also be a not equals to. Yeah.
It's so weird that if it's not equal to false, return false.
I know.
I probably shouldn't.
You wrote it weird.
You know what? We're gonna change this to active user. So if it equals to 0, it's true.
You wouldn't have had to have changed anything. You just could have changed the 2.
What?
You could, if you had left everything as not equal to, you could have just changed the those 2 returns. So leave that as not equal to, and then change it to true. Yeah, and then the bottom one's false.
Okay. There we go. So but let's also add, because we don't really know.
Oh yeah. See, I mean, it's.
And we'll add a typo here, just for.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous.
This is where
I don't think there's parens around. It's just type of space in the variable.
I disagree with you.
Fine, whatever.
Oh, did I not save it?
No, you got to take the parens off.
Wait, I need to.
Oh, change the name.
Yeah. All right, so are they an active? So it's a type of string. It's a 0 type of string.
See?
And it's true. All right, but
I told you, man.
But it isn't
so,
true. But it isn't true. They aren't active. So I think.
Yeah, but that unchecked is false. So in the record, it is unchecked, which is false. If it was checked, it would be true.
Okay, so what should this logic be, right? Because something is not right here, right?
Yeah, if active equals false, it should return false.
If active equals false, it should return false. Yes. So if this is false, it should return false. So if it, but
currently it does equal 0, so it's returning true, huh?
Mm-hmm. So it's saying that it's equal to 0, and this is returning true.
How?
Here, let's use we'll just do the dot notation.
And do it to string, and then you know for positive what it is.
Okay, string it.
No. Dot to
string. This is the actual right way.
Oh, did they? Yeah, they changed it, didn't they?
You should use, because this is a ServiceNow native function. So let's see. Oof. Okay, we got false type string. Okay, so the activity is, so we know it's a false string. So this should be fine, right? It's saying it's false.
Well, if it's returning false, then it should be false. Not true.
Oh, yes. Oh, but yeah, but this is the check, right?
If activity equals false,
true,
then it should return.
So in this case, if they're an active user, it's saying they're false, and they return false. Cool.
Yep.
So now let's make them an active user.
And it should return true.
And this should return true.
There you go. Now we're correct.
So now we're gonna do expect it to return false. Okay, so this is still good now, except it's now an active user. And I probably should have done is active user instead of, but that's okay. All right, so now let's run this and see. One of our tests should fail, right? Hey, there we go. Both of them failed. Expected true. Oh,
Oh, are you looking at a Boolean? A Boolean though?
that's okay though, because we're returning a
Oh,
Boolean. I think it's just only one test should fail. Yeah, there we go. All right. Our code is popping. Look at
all
that.
right, I got you.
So that's how you're using these parameters, and we're passing those in, and this should return failed in our case. So that's working as is. So that's essentially how you could write unit tests, right? Like for parameterized data for this function, right? So now no matter where I call this, I can then run this unit test to see if it worked, right? And so then the next thing is if we really wanted to also test the set active, we could query. Okay, we'll finish up here and on the last step, and then we'll call it. No. So what the last part of this is is you want to validate that the record that is actually changing, right? So from this parameter, this sysid, or this use, I guess we'll just do user ID.
Well, but that's not. I don't know that that's correct. So it's looking to see that the user changes.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Oh, okay.
And because we're setting them to active, right? And active is true, right? So we're checking this user to see if they are now actually active, right? Like
Is it going to be a problem that you went with user ID and not sysid though? Because we're not
uh
passing user.
it'll be fine because the parameter has access to that, right?
Okay,
So this was expecting them to be um
false.
uh
Not inactive.
yeah, and then I think we can call after all function. I think after all works. Did I not do that right? Ooh. Oh, geez.
Can you get can you get if you type in after all? Like if you just
Did,
type it in, does it give you a
oh, I think I did this too many times. There we go. Oh, well, that's
no,
not what I wanted.
you still need a bracket or a paren after the curly. Yeah, there you go.
There we go. And what we're gonna do is call script dot, what was it? What did I name this function? Set
Set
active.
active.
And we're gonna pass in params.user sys ID.
So that will only after all only calls if you get a fail.
No, it's after all of your tests, right?
Oh,
So,
so you can't, can you not specify that says only if it's,
well, this function will only do it if they're inactive,
all
right?
right.
So we're
Okay,
we're
that
fine there,
works.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
I was just wondering if
so
you could get a little conditional inside that.
you probably could. You can write if statements, right? I just don't know if we'll get value out of it, right?
Sure, sure.
So one test failed. Oh, only did both fail. Interesting. So it only worked for. Oh, I think it stopped after Abel's because the test up failed, so it didn't run the
Right.
others.
Yeah.
But um,
Yeah, and it's also, well, no.
no, so that should have worked. Maybe the after all isn't what I wanted to do in that case. Um, and it's also a little tricky because I'm using like an actual record, versus normally what you would do is we would create a user and then set those parameters, then run the script on that user, versus actually using user data. So I think I would just put this here and call that.
Oh, I think you had.
Oh, too much.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I think you grabbed.
Okay. So, whew. All right. And we'll probably call it there, whether this runs or not.
A part two coming up. I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so I think the tough part is what we did here is, oh, forget to change this. Oh gosh. All right,
That
there we
could
go.
be problematic.
Yeah. Because I was like, it shouldn't fail on able, so this should, in theory, turn into active. It should pass. Okay. Did it turn into active? Interesting. Nope. Okay. So we'd have to come back. But yeah, I think the true thing, what we should be doing is creating a user rather
Hmm.
than
Updating actual user records.
yeah. And so then it should be a three-step process. You do some setup data, you're creating some stuff, you're running your function, and then you're validating that function change those things, right? So that's kind of the three different ways you would, potentially use this. And then we also showed how you can, in that script, new in San Diego, like call these
The
parameters.
parameters, yeah.
And we talked a little bit about patterns, but there definitely needs to be more because we only got through one
Yeah,
pattern.
we only discussed the common one, and we definitely need another part to this because I would like to go through the other patterns.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They are not something that I use very often. In fact, I
Hmm.
don't know that I've ever done any of those patterns
Yeah.
that he goes over just because they weren't, it's just not something that I guess I've not run into a need.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
it would be nice to go over them to discuss why you would want to do it this way versus, the original um, pattern.
Yeah, so I think what I'll do is I'll keep this instance up so we don't have to like redo that.
Maybe what we can do is just do a couple of shorts on each pattern, in the coming weeks. Maybe just hit one pattern, discuss it, and then the
Hmm.
next one we hit the next pattern and so forth, just so we can actually get into it a little bit on each pattern versus trying to take them all together and go through them.
Totally. Yeah, I'm with you. I think that's a good idea. Maybe we'll spend a few minutes now that I'll get the ATF stuff set up so that when we
Right.
run
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
pattern, we'll be able to test it.
Okay.
But at least we showed like you can have an ATF, you can run a unit test inside of ATF, so there's no excuse to not to put your stuff into scripts. If you truly
Sure.
wanted to embody the like software development practice of unit testing your scripts, even if they're
Hmm.
intended to modify data, all you have to do is set up the data first, right? A record insert on some table because it's going to roll it back anyways on an ATF. So it's totally fine. You just set up some record insert, create user, whatever that is, run your script, and then query to see if that record was actually created or not, right? So,
Sure.
or
Yeah.
modified. So,
No, I
cool.
agree.
So I'll get some of
Yeah.
that
This
set up and we'll do some quick shorts next time.
sweet. I love it.
All right. If you like this content, we know we've had some more subscribers, and if you truly want to see Jon clean up his back office, he just
Oh,
needs more subscribers.
you're gonna
So
get
if
me in
you
trouble with the wife, man.
if
Shh,
you
don't
like
talk
if you
about
like us, fumbling through ServiceNow and
it. Look,
trying
we're
to do things
real
on the fly.
users. We're real users experiencing real service now, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, all right, take it easy, everyone.
All right, we'll see you.